Hello, I'm Helene Oberman, Managing Director of Interior Design Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to Product Live. This is our series that delves into the products and trends grabbing the industry and in real time looking at the minds behind the design. At Williams-Sonoma Inc, they are dedicated to transforming spaces through the best in design and quality. Since entering the contract market in 2015, their in-house design and engineering teams have been collaborating to elevate their products to standards. And with 8 different brands, yes, that's 8 different brands at their fingertips, they have a specialized team to help support your design business and work with you to create solutions tailored to your project needs, no matter the scale, from, let's say, a ground-up basketball stadium to perhaps a local restaurant in your very own backyard. With me today to discuss the launch of their latest B2B product that spans 3 WSI brands is Paulo Kos, Vice President of Design for Business to Business. Welcome, Paulo.
Thank you.
Paulo, before we begin, it may be helpful to educate our audience about the contract capabilities of Williams-Sonoma and really to break that mindset that you're just a retail brand.
Absolutely. What we do on my team is that we are a small design team that's focused entirely on commercial and contract spaces. So we're kind of, in addition to the brand designers that are working on the stuff for the retail product that you see on the websites. And so what we do is we both design specific products like the ones that we're going to be talking about today for our line, but then we also work very closely with designers who might be working on projects, large, hotel projects, for example, that have a certain minimum quantity that we can hit, and we're either doing custom product for them or we're modifying product from one of our brands for their needs.
And you, heading it up, have sort of created your very own team, right? That's dedicated to this like commercial world that's somewhat separate from what's happening sort of on the residential retail side.
That's right. We're kind of this little satellite off to the side. I'm very lucky in that I have a great team working with me across all different functions. And we kind of work side by side with all of the different brands. So it's a lot of fun because we get to work with West Elm, and then we get to work with Pottery Barn and Williams-Sonoma Home. So yes, what we're doing is we're kind of working in tandem with them. Their design teams are focused specifically on the retail product that you see on the website. And then what we're looking at is where are the holes of product that, are really integral to commercial spaces. And we're kind of designing into them for those brands.
And you have the ability to work with designers on products really for various scale projects, from the very large. I know we had a recent conversation with some folks from Williams-Sonoma about a new basketball stadium, but also for much smaller scale projects.
Absolutely. Sometimes we'll have people come to us to help them with their, 6-room boutique hotel, or maybe it's a cafe or restaurant. But then, like, as you mentioned, we've worked on large-scale stadiums. We're currently bidding a soccer stadium somewhere. So it's a lot of fun for me because it's a lot of different types of spaces, and it just goes to show how versatile the product is.
So we're actually here today because you have a new product, a banquette, that the company has designed across 3 of your brands. So Williams-Sonoma Home, West Elm, and Pottery Barn. So what is the impetus for designing a single product type across several different brands?
Well, we wanted to leverage the varied aesthetics of all the different brands to kind of create unique solutions for different instances. So if a client is looking for something more modern and minimal, we have the Garbo banquette that works in that instance. Or if somebody's looking for something a little bit more vintage or traditional, classic, we have the Hayworth, and then we have the
Novak, right?
Thank you.
And
then we have the Novak, which is more mid.
Not forget the great Novak for West Elm.
Right, and then we have the Novak, which was inspired by mid-century influences.
So was this your first product that you actually designed across brand, or have you done previous ones?
It's the first time that we've taken one product category, designed them across the three brands, and launched them at the same time as one big program. We have in the past designed our restaurant tables for West Elm, and we're currently working with some of the other brands to create their versions so that we have, again, a big system that offers different aesthetics to different clients.
So what was the inspiration then for deciding to launch this sort of cross-brand product promotion with a banquette?
Well, you know, it was just really trying to create unique solutions for everyday problems for designers out there who are trying to create, you know, different spaces. So what we wanted to do was create 3 unique solutions for different problems. For example, with Hayworth, what we wanted to do was create something that was a solution for somebody maybe looking for a more classical location or maybe a more contemporary spin on a vintage inspired location. So we took inspiration from Chesterfield sofas and created a very deep tufted back cushion. We kept the seat cushion smooth for ease of cleaning because we're always thinking about operational problems. And so with that one, we added the turned legs as a nice design feature at the bottom. And of course, added the integrated power, which was a key element of each of the designs from the beginning.
And then, so what would someone be looking for in terms of the Garbo for Williams-Sonoma Home?
And then for Garbo, we really wanted something that was super sleek, modern, minimal, that could really kind of go anywhere. I mean, with this one, you can kind of, you know, put it in a really elegant suede or mohair velvet and create a very luxe experience, or you could put, you know, a red vinyl and put it in a diner. You know, so you can dress it up and you can dress it down. It's extremely versatile, again, with the power in the plinth base. And lastly, we have the Novak, and that one was probably the more, I would say, fashion forward of the 3 because it's got the expressed angled legs at the bottom, which were influenced by mid-century, and then the long horizontal tuft along the back. And that one was for somebody who maybe wants a little more look than the other ones, but still simple enough that it can kind of go anywhere and really match back to a lot of tables and chair solutions.
I'm actually curious if you know, so who's the one that's coming up with these names associated with the products? And did they sort of address the personality of each one?
So we had a conversation about this a while back when we started launching products, and we really wanted to make sure that we were kind of creating a cohesive statement. So we decided to, we landed on naming all of the products after Hollywood, old Hollywood stars. So yeah, so what we've done is we've kind of, I have a big list somewhere on my hard drive of old Hollywood names, and I just go back to the well every time we're about to launch something and feel like I just try to pair the piece with whichever name feels right.
Well, I think each one has their own little bit of glamour, like the Hollywood stars that they represent.
That's what we were going for.
Yeah. Well, I was curious, where are these pieces being fabricated?
They're actually being fabricated. They're being assembled here in the U.S. in our own Sutter Street upholstery facility that Williams-Sonoma owns in North Carolina.
And it's interesting because while the banquettes are sort of part of the running line for the brands, the products are actually really customizable because you offer so many configurations and fabrics, and you know, I think it's almost endless, correct?
Yeah, we wanted to be able to make it versatile but still simple. So each collection comes in 4 simple sizes, basically set around the size of a person. So we have the single, which sits a person, the double, the triple, and then the corner, which itself sits 2 to 3 people, depending on if somebody wants to get wedged in the corner. And so with those 4 simple components, you can really kind of put them together however many ways you want. So they gang together with hardware so that you don't have pieces shifting left to right. And so you can gang them side to side or back to back also to create kind of a booth experience if you wanted to. and as you said, they also come in many different, we have a lot of different fabrics available for them, or they're also available in COM, which further customizes them.
Well, we all know designers, and designers love to customize and really put their own stamp on products that they specify. So I'm sure everyone out there will be excited by it. But, to your point, you said, while a designer can use COM for the banquette, you do offer a large array of contract grain fabrics and textiles that really suit the needs of public space. And I know that with this idea of health and well-being, really, I guess, at the forefront of everyone's mind, to have a lot of fabrics that have antimicrobial properties, which I'm sure we're all thinking, let's keep us safe.
Yeah, absolutely. In this day and age, that's very much at the forefront of everybody's mind. Yeah, so as you said, we have a lot of different fabrics. So we have kind of different buckets of fabrics that we offer. So we have the inline residential fabrics, some of which have been tested to contract grade. And so those are available. But then we also we've had a collaboration with DesignTex for the past, I'd say 4 years. And so we have a collection with them, which we're working to make available on these. They're not quite available yet, but actually they're available now as COM, but we're working to make them an easier access to this collection. And then, of course, we also have a collection with Culp, which we really kind of relied on their expertise in the industry to kind of make sure that we have high performance fabrics that are really going to pass the needs of these designers. And some of those are bleach cleanable, and some of those do have antimicrobial finishes.
And then obviously continuing with this idea of health and safety, and the fact that the banquette comes in these various sizes, a designer can really create a space with smaller groups and social distancing in mind. Absolutely.
As I mentioned, each component is designed to sit 1 or 2 or 3 people specifically. So it really makes it very easy to kind of control how many people you want in one space. So you could take 2 singles and put them face to face and really create a space for just 2 people. These pieces work great in kind of phone booth applications where people just are sitting alone, or of course you can kind of gang a whole bunch together and make much more of a group experience.
And then, as you're designing the banquette, I mean, how did you ultimately see it being used and what type of spaces?
I mean, really, we wanted to make the most versatile product possible. So we really see them, the obvious place would be in restaurants, of course, because that's typically where you see banquettes. But, we see these being used in anything from bars to doctors' waiting rooms to, co-working spaces, especially because we have the power integrated. We really made sure that that was a key feature because we know that people are working everywhere and anywhere nowadays.
Or at least under normal circumstances.
Yes, when you're allowed back indoors.
Yeah, no, of course. No, I understand that. I mean, it's like you can't go anywhere without this, right? But I'm really curious to know, what is the next piece? So you have this beautiful banquette for the 3 brands, for Williams-Sonoma Home, for West Elm and Pottery Barn. So what is sort of the next venture that you are working on across the brands?
Well, my talented team is currently working very hard on the launch of a bunch of communal tables, which will kind of extend that kind of restaurant experience. So we're working on some large-scale dining height tables, as well as some bar height tables or standing height tables.
And actually, I'm curious, just how far in advance are you working on your new product introductions?
We're typically about a year out. So right now we're kind of looking into 2021.
And do you find that this specific time period has really affected the way you're looking at different product typologies and what you're working on for sort of the next iteration?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you can't really come away from the experience we're all living in without thinking about spaces differently. And so it's definitely, shaped the way we look at the products that we're designing. And there are a lot of, considerations that we're thinking about much more, like you said, like cleanability and, just really the performance aspects of these pieces.
Well, it's unfortunate, but like time goes very quickly. So I have to say, Paulo, thank you so much for your time and insight. I know that we all want to be together lounging in one of those banquettes very, very soon in person. And I would love to tell our audience out there, please make sure to check out the WSI B2B website to learn more about the banquette and other contract products from Williams-Sonoma.
One of the hardest times to create, if somebody tells you you have all the time, all the money, do whatever you want, in which medium you want, go at it. Sounds fascinating, sounds great. I think that void is actually paralyzing.
A new practice that I'm trying to bring into that creative process is taking some time to sort of decompress and focus on the ideas that exist, and then often just trying to pick the one that I literally see in front of my nose.
Welcome to Metropolis Sustainable Product Spotlight. I'm Senior Editor Kelly Beamon. Today, we're taking a look at Teknion's use of battery-free mechanisms, specifically for height-adjustable tables and desks. It's a hidden design feature, but with a big impact on energy use, packaging, and ease of installation. With me to talk about this innovation and the company's long history of incorporating environmentally friendly practices in manufacturing is Tracy Bacchus, Director of Sustainability Programs, and Daniel Smith, Director of Product Management, Seating, and Ergonomic Products for the company. Tracy, let's start with your company's long history of sustainability.
Thank you, Kelly. So for a young company, just over 35 years old, we do have a long legacy of sustainability. And as a privately owned company, when a lot of times companies will back away from things that are the right thing to do, because they may not be the financial thing to do, we've never taken our foot off the gas, and we really wouldn't do it any other way. We're not about being first, we're really about being better. So what you'll hear today is not about a brand new product, but an evolution of a product that has gone from something that was a product introduction to a red list free material solution to an ergonomic solution that is now deeply ingrained within the well building standard. And we're gonna kind of give you a sneak peek into some of the information on energy, because we're very focused on energy now and our carbon. We have been. It's not something we just woke up today and said, hey, let's go do that. But we've been looking at the Sustainable Development Goals for a while. And we know that carbon is a huge, big elephant in the room today. So looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. Daniel, perhaps you could take us into the discussion of this mechanism, which sounds a bit low tech, but has this great impact that a lot of other companies are just waking up to looking into.
Sure. So we always strive to put a new innovation or something that's been around for a very long time, a mechanism, so springs or pulleys, into machines or into furniture in a new way to try to take advantage of our wonderful engineering resources that we have at Teknion. And so what we did back in the late 80s with a gentleman by the name of Hannah Shaheen, he's the primary inventor on our counterbalance tables. He was able to take spring technology and put it into your standard table so that you could get a sit-stand technology. Sit-stand is something that people have been heavily talking about in the last 5 or 6 years. we've been doing this for, 35 plus years. And what he was able to do for us was that he took this torsion spring technology. And I'm going to get a little detailed because I think that the people watching this are probably going to enjoy just a little bit of behind the curtain, because I live and breathe details and gears and mechanics every single day. And so I thought that it'd probably be in our best interest just to dive just a little deep on that. So what he was able to do is take a torsion spring. So as you turn a torsion spring, it winds up and it gets a lot of power. And then as it turns the other way, it releases the power. And we're able to put that into a table. So you can go from a sitting to a seating technology really easy. It's super cost effective. The power draw is zero, right? It's renewable. It never really goes away. We've sold, I think to date, it's just shy of 1 million of these tables, and we don't have any claims on them. We don't have any troubles. It's just a tried, tested, and true technology. And so we were able to take that and provide something that's, very focused towards people's wellness and the ability to continue to be productive while at work.
Awesome. Well, you also mentioned when we spoke previously that this sort of technology, which is more classic, I guess, would be, in terms of cost comparison, we would compare with like a gas cylinder. Is that right? Or is it electrical? Okay,
so both exist, right? So out in the world of sit-stand, in the office furniture market, the electric tables have become extremely popular. The cost of electric tables over the last 30 years has significantly decreased. The technology's gotten a lot better, so they're quieter. They can do a better sit-stand range, accommodate more people. The power draw that they do use has decreased. The way to manufacture them has also become much more efficient. And then what we've done is we've taken our technology, our counterbalance technology, and we've also evolved at the same time. So we originally used the technology, one, because it was super efficient to do in a time where motors, actuators, control boxes were, very cost prohibitive for most companies. So we were able to go in there, take a very cost-effective technology like springs, right, and create a product that did all these things. And so what's happened in today's world is that these things, the cost advantage has pretty much become it's null at this point. But what it does do is it provides you other advantages. The sweet spot for us is that we're able to take this very sustainable focused technology and we're able to provide it out to people where they can use the table, and it is super quick, it's super quiet, and it's super stable. And those are my 3 supers, okay? And when you come to speed, sound, and stability, those are the 3 supers or 3 S's of sit-stand that drive everybody's decision making. And so if we can have an impact on that, then we can have an impact on providing a good product in somebody's workspace. We've done that. And then when you mentioned gas cylinders are a special thing, right? So one, you have to take a bit of effort to recycle them, okay, which we all can do, but it is a step that you must take at the end of life of the product. Okay, and 2, they're very difficult to adjust the amount of force that they have inside of them. Right, that's not something that you generally see in, say, a seat chair or in a height adjustable table. It tends to have a certain amount of force available to it. Well, the amount of weight you're going to put on a table isn't something I can control as a designer or as the person in charge of the product. So some people might put 3 CPUs on. I don't think that's really going to happen today. It's more like I'm going to put on a laptop and a really light monitor arm, but maybe you're going to drop some books on there and you're going to drop some other weight. And so as the weight changes on a gas cylinder-based product, you can't change the weight that it's going to counterbalance. And you want it to be light, effortless, very quick, and user-friendly, right? It's got to be user-focused. With springs, you simply wind them or you pull on them, right? And then the amount of force that they have changes. So it's super easy, super quick, and it keeps the experience very consistent, which on any product that it has adjustability and you want people to use, the more consistent it is, the more likely people are to actually use it, which is, what we want in the end of the day.
Awesome. Well, as a person who is also a mom, I am for anything that's battery free as well, or uses or requires very little electricity. So I think that's probably the biggest selling point for me, or, you know, point of interest. But I also was impressed that the packaging is another aspect of the, well, and let's name the table that this mechanism is in particular, that so that people could recognize.
Sure thing. So today's version of the mech is in the Navigate line of height adjustable tables, and it's called our Navigate Counterbalance table. And so that's the one that streamlines all of this today. And you mentioned the packaging. You know, we don't have to come up with all the good ideas, right? We just have to sometimes take good ideas and make them our own and make them a little better. And we borrowed, you know, a really solid packaging style and technique from the flat panel TV industry. They came up with a way of taking these things that are very much the size of our work surfaces in the office world and transported them, you know, so that it's super simple, nothing gets damaged. And we were able to take that and actually apply that to the frame of the height adjustable table so that we could pre-assemble it, put the mechanism together, make it super simple for people when they get it to their work site or in their home. Right? We want to take as much of that away as possible. I don't want you to have to get out 25 different tools, lay everything out, spend your entire Saturday afternoon putting something together. That's not the goal here. And so, yeah, we borrowed that, and you know, we did little things that if you just do it up front, they make a big difference. Like we have a molded egg crating for the product, so that when it does get on site, it gets created or gets assembled, then you can take all 60, 100, whatever it is, slide them into each other, and the chances of, you know, that reaching its right destination to be recycled are much higher. The amount of trucks that you're going to need to take that recycling from the site of assembly to the recycling facility will be less, right? So it just minimizes everything that we would need.
Right.
We've designed the weight out. That's that Kelly too. That, you know, that's what's made the packaging thin and light, but also very effective, is because we've reduced the materials that we need and the weight of the table just through continuing to design towards the environment. Right. And just something else on packaging to touch on, we have a lot of clients now who are asking for net zero waste in addition to net zero carbon. So this is a really important thing for us as we look at evolving into the next, you know, topic of concern for our clients.
Yeah, I was impressed with the idea that not only do you make the recycling job easier for a client who's placing a large order with your company, but you put a number on it. You could fit 30 or 40 of these egg crate cardboard pallet on a pallet. I'm sorry. But can you tell us about how that helps them meet this net zero waste goal?
Well, I think once upon a time, you would have had a lot of packaging, which although it be, you know, ours is 100% recyclable, it's still packaging. You still have to deal with it. So the ability to put more of the product into a single truck or into a single delivery and then be able to move that packaging off site is exponentially significant when we talk about large projects. If it's to your home office, that's a bit of a different story. But when we're talking about some of the clients that we have, the opportunity for thousands of these tables, you know, as Daniel said, we've sold almost 1 million of them. Imagine what the packaging not being reduced and addressed efficiently would have had on the recycling stream. You know, part of the problem too is even though packaging can be recycled, there's not a demand for it as much as there used to be. So if we can eliminate and make good even better with packaging, that's a real benefit and a real goal that we're trying to achieve. So the number of these pieces, 30 or 40 stacked on a single pallet versus maybe a time when there were 20 is pretty significant.
I think that all of these things are reasons that I wanted us to take a look at this sort of hidden design feature that, like I said, it might seem like a minor thing, but it makes a big impact. So I appreciate you giving viewers some insight into this. And I hope that we can speak about many other innovations that Teknion has built into its manufacturing process in the future. I think this is great and enlightening.
Welcome to Masterclass. I'm Pamela Jaccarino, Interiors and Design. I'm so pleased to have a very special guest today. He's an icon of interior design, an intrepid traveler, renowned photographer, and overall masterful gentleman. Welcome, Vicente Wolf. Vicente, hi, how are you?
How are you, Pamela? So nice to be here with you.
It's good to see you. How have you been holding up during our COVIDian times?
Well, to tell you the truth, God, I leave without the mask. Then halfway down, I forgot, oh, I have the mask. Go upstairs, get the mask, come down. It's really such a hard time on everybody. I think because of business, because of physical, I think our industry is having a hard time, I think. I think everybody's having a hard time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have these moments when I'm like getting out of my car if I'm driving, where for a minute, I don't put I like forget. I feel like we're back in normal times, and then it's on with the mask. And so it's it's a lot of stress. I will say though, I think that the design industry and most people are just incredible at adapting. But what a year it has been, and this too shall pass. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, yes?
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, yes. Well, I think that what's interesting is that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I think people living in their homes for months and months and months, when this, knock wood, is all over, I think that they're going to realize, like, my God, I need to change my home. I need to bring something, make it more comfortable, make it a little more, present. So I think it will pay back to our industry when things settle down.
I do too. I think it's a lot of people are prioritizing things differently, and I think the home is an area that people are prioritizing. It's one, you can't really do, we were so busy, just everyone traveling and going, and a lot of distractions. And so when those distractions get eliminated and you're stuck at your home.
Right.
I know for me, I've gone through, I sort of want what I want within means, obviously. So yeah, chalk it up to weird times. But I want to take it back.
Look at the stock for restoration hardware. It's one of the up and up and up. It's amazing. Everybody's buying from home.
Everyone's buying. So Vicente, this is interesting. The first time I heard you speak was many, many years ago at a design event, and that your talk stayed with me all these years. And your talk was very from the heart. You talked about confidence, lack of confidence, how you had gained yours as a designer, and sort of what you're about. And talk a little bit about what it was like. We're going to get into sort of the details of how you started, but what is it like to start as sort of an underdog? And for you, you worked your way up to be, one of the most accomplished designers in our industry. Talk a little bit about that with our viewers.
But let me ask you, do you think a dog knows that he's down there? It's the way it is. I mean, I think that ignorance is wonderful at times, because I was more focused on where I wanted to end up than where I was. And once I found that interior design was the thing I wanted, it just propelled me. And, being in the right place at the right time makes such a big difference. I don't know that if I were now at this time where I was then, that I would have succeeded. But I think that just being in a situation where design was changing, where there weren't that many designers out there, just made it a much easier thing for me.
Well, I think also it had a lot to do with you and who you are, because you started your career in a very unusual way, and I would say there's a lot of things about you that are unconventional, which I love, and that's really what's motivated and helped you. But you say very openly, like, you got fired a lot. you were an actor, you worked at Bird Dog, for Burger Goodman's, and you kept on getting fired. You ended up in the design and decoration building in New York. And this is interesting. You freelanced really sort of to learn the design business, and back at that time, you have said that you like to work for designers who are really bad, which runs very counter. Most people would say, I would work for the best, but you like the opportunity to shine in areas that they could not. What did you learn from working for bad designers?
Well, it was really, if you work for, listen, I know it when I have people that have worked for me, you know, they become you. They start to think like you. That's what you want them to do, is to think like you. It's very hard when you leave to break away from that and then go back to who you are. But if you work for somebody who, I kept saying, oh my God, look how they present, how they build, how they run their business, you know, how they're designing, how they're treating the clients. I'm never going to do that. It just it's much easier to see what you shouldn't do than what you should do, because the other isn't such a broad thing. I mean, seeing them, how a client would be coming in and they'd bring out baskets of fabrics and say, oh, which one do you like? Oh, we'll design the room around that, instead of conceptualizing. And I think that they were coming from the point of give them whatever they want, make the money, and not really follow their gut and their instinct and what they believed in.
It was also a time when you were coming up when there was a lot of exploration about interior architecture. I mean, it was like the time of like John Saladino. There were really some great people that you were, you know, a part of. And do you think that that helped as well? Being at that, as you said, you know, the right time. And it's very different, right? Today, we have a lot of people that, you know, gain fame because of their Instagram and not because of, you know,
the creativity.
Work.
Well, you know, the thing, it was amazing because there were very few. There was Saladino, there was Grace Scheivel, there was Dorso, there was us. And I mean, we were doing things that none of the other designers were doing, which was doing the architecture, designing the furniture, really creating environments, not decorating spaces. And I think that there was a middle class that was really coming up fast, and they wanted to make their own statement. So being there just allowed it. And of course, the magazines, they wanted that because it was something new. So it was an amazing time because you were able to really let your imagination run wild. And the clients just loved it, you know. And there wasn't that sense of, well, I will tell you how to do it. They were, you're the professional, you're giving me what I've asked for, great. You know, it was, you know, okay, hindsight is always wonderful, but, you know.
Do you think it is, do you think nowadays it is harder for designers to be imaginative, or do you think with the fact that there's a lot more access for homeowners? I mean, you know, what would you say, you know, why was it easier to sort of let your imagination run free at that time as opposed to the times we're in now?
Well, but forget interior design. Look at fashion. In the late 70s, you know, designers were creating looks that women went out and bought, and they bought the whole thing. That died. And the same thing in our industry, in that people now feel like I can do it myself, but I will, you know, it's easier if I hire a designer. They're coming in with preconceived ideas of what it should be without really understanding that you can have a lot of different ideas, but it's putting them together and creating an environment that is really, it's not about buying furniture. And it's a line that I'm using more and more with clients. The fact that it's not about buying furniture. Anybody can buy furniture, but not that many people can create environments. And then an environment is really what makes you feel good, because it's not about the individual pieces, but it's how you feel when you're in that space.
Well, I agree with you, but it's also, I would add to that, Vicente, that it's about vision. And I want to circle back to that in my question. So the theme, Vicente Wolf, unconventional genius. So you're also unconventional when it comes to design education. You did not attend traditional design school, and much of your huge success has come from making your own rules and your own vision, which I think it's interesting because you've really let your range of vision be guided by your personal point of view, which I think is very strong. And as a child, you were dyslexic. You learned to absorb the world visually, which is a very different perspective than studying a book. Talk about design education, your type of education, and how it served you.
Well, let's say if you didn't have any arms, your legs get very strong. Or if you don't have legs, your arms get very strong. When you're dyslexic, you're trying to find something to be able to express yourself, to see it. So you're developing your vision because, to go to school, I never graduated high school because in Cuba, they just kept passing me in the grades because I just kept getting taller and taller. So it was a big problem because I couldn't absorb, I couldn't put it together. But visually, I could see things really, I was just designing a space not so long ago that I just sat there and I could literally see it in front of me. And I think that was part of what has made me who I am. And the fact of educating myself visually by going to museums, by traveling. Now that I've gotten better with reading about different people and how they chose to live their lives, I think that sort of starts to focus you on what you really believe in and not what rules you're being given to follow.
But I feel like it took you a little bit of time to accept that, right? Because there's the, right, there's sort of the conventional way that the acceptable norms for how whatever your profession is, you're supposed to come up, which might be labeled as sort of, a little BS, sorry. I think it's
I've been labeled much more than that.
It's so much more interesting to me to hear a story about someone like yourself who did it in a different way. I think it's inspiring, quite frankly.
But you know something? Maybe if I wasn't dyslexic, I would have done very well in school and gone a different route. I think it's having the strength from wherever it may come to deal with what you've been given and try to make the best out of it to achieve what you want. And thank God I was creative. If I wasn't creative, I'd be in the street. For sure, because I just did not have what it took to be able to do an uncreative job. My brain doesn't work that way. Now I'm very good at business, when I'm dealing with clients and things like that. But when you're working for somebody else, there are rules that you have to follow and how you have to produce things. And I just didn't have the thing to do it. But I think, and why I've always said it, that I was dyslexic and all these problems, is because I think there are a lot of people out there that beat themselves up. Not that I don't, and I do it constantly, but not when it comes to my creativity. I think that people have to really believe in themselves and believe that what they have to offer has a value. And I think that, let's say you say, well, I don't know if I have great taste. Well, most people don't have great taste. So that makes you better in business and more successful, probably because more people relate to you. Oh, you don't have any taste? Neither do I. I'm going to argue. So I think that, you have to really believe that you're going to succeed. You have to believe that a higher power has given you a gift and that you must stand up for that. You must be really paying back for the gifts you've been given.
I think it's also about evolving. All of us, hopefully, are always sort of evolving and growing and right on this continual journey. And, you know, it's interesting for someone like you who's seen so much, you've designed so much, it's been so many years, how for you, and especially during these times, I know travel is very important to you. We can't sort of like get on planes now. How have you been keeping things and yourself fresh and pushing yourself forward?
Well, it's funny because I'm working on a new book that will come out next year. And working on that book and trying to bring forward a lot of the questions that you're asking me right now and putting that down so I can share with people really has given me an impetus to, you know, I read Martha Stewart's biography years ago, and, you know, her focus, whether it was prison, whatever, it was her focus that she just kept going. Whatever came from the side, she discarded. And I try to do that each day to pray for a higher power to give me that strength to not see the demons, not see the insecurities, but keep thinking of what it is that I want to accomplish. And, you know, it works some days and it doesn't. I think in the times that we're living right now, it's just so, you're being assaulted in so many different ways.
Yes.
It's so easy to just lay down and die.
Yeah, well, it's over. Yeah, it can be. I was with someone yesterday. He said, "Are you feeling extremely overwhelmed?" And I think it's easy to get sort of sucked into everything that's happening. And I agree. It can be harder to focus. Yet also, it's a time where it's interesting because there's a lot of chaos going on. I mean, you turn on the news and honestly, you just want to like jump out the window. But it's also a time where it's a little bit quieter. So we're not right because there's less places to go. And I think it's a time where you can sit with your thoughts a little bit more. Sometimes that's exciting. Sometimes it can be
it's a problem.
It can be a problem. So wait, I want to ask you about your book because this is your 5th book. Yes, is that correct?
Yes, it is. Amazing for a dyslexic person that can't spell and has it hard to read that I'm doing a book, but yes.
Well, this is why we love you, Vicente. You just keep on keeping on. But okay, so 2 questions. When is it coming out? And then what is the gist of it? Can you share with us what this book is about?
So it is, it's a 2-part. It's left brain and right brain. The left brain talks about, as you said before, from the heart, the story of my life, the good things, the bad things, the things that I was picking up as I was growing up, and how I got to where I am right now. The second half is questions and my answers to them from my personal experiences. They're not rules, but it is how I've dealt with these particular questions. And then with it are photographs that are sort of explaining what I am talking about. The first 3 books that I did really had such a wonderful response from people. Because they felt that there was an honesty to it, the fact that I was able to share what I believed in, and not from a pompous point of view, but from from a humble
pride. Well, right, and pride in what you do, which you should have.
So I wanted to touch that again and to make, in a time like that we're living, that people can say, got it. If this guy didn't graduate high school, didn't do that, and look where he got, I can do the same thing. And I think I think it's important that you should be able to give hope to people. Because
well, that's what you did. This is what, when I'm telling you, when you spoke, I will never forget. So that is exactly what you were speaking to, sort of like that the reality that, right, we're all sort of walking around with insecurities, with no one's perfect, that, you know, we all have sort of our flaws, and you really have to accept them and then try to work with them and around them to get to a level of expression that touches who you really are, which I think, you know, you're all about that.
Well, I hope I'm not still saying the same things I did then, said then. I think about that. I think about, well, you know, you give this talk and you talk. Is it the same shinola that one is repeating? I mean, is there any new message that one can give? And I've certainly, that's what I tried to do with a book, is to give it a different way, say it a different way, you know.
Well, it's always inspiring. We're looking forward. We're looking forward to that. Is it next spring that it's coming out, or next fall, Vicente?
I think next fall. I mean, because all the books that were coming out this year, a lot of them have been pushed.
Yes, I know.
I have hope for the spring, but I think the spring is full already. So
yeah,
the fall. And it'll be a wonderful new fall with
I know. Let's hear. My fingers are crossed.
My legs are crossed.
Everything's crossed. So I also want to ask you about, you are very involved with giving back, and you're involved with God's Love We Deliver. And I was hoping that you can talk a little bit about the organization for our viewers, and, you know, the good work that you do and that the organization does as well.
Well, the organization does very good. They serve 1,700,000 meals a year. And the moment that a doctor calls and says, Mr. X is not well, cannot feed himself, they will immediately prepare specific meals to their diets, deliver it, have somebody bring it to their door, say, hi, how are you? How are you feeling? If it's their birthday, a little cake is made. It's just trying to really bring humanity, bring love, God's love to these people. And if it's a mother and she has 2 children, the children get fed as well. And it is something that it's not just whatever food is being given, it's specifically prepared to their dietary needs. And I think especially in a time like this where we are all trying to watch out for ourselves and trying to survive, these people that are out there who are they may have cancer, they may have so many different types of diseases that debilitate them. Having that food, having that sense of love coming to them is the thing that may keep them alive or not. It is proven that people that eat healthy foods are able to get well faster and live longer. And that is what we're trying to do, because it's costing this country millions and millions of dollars to having people in hospitals, when if they're fed well and they keep healthy, they will live and not have to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
So
and
anybody out there that wants to donate, it's God's love. And whether it's $5, $2, whatever it is you have, it's really, you know that it's going, 90% of the money that comes in goes to the charity, which is very different than a lot of charities out there that 10% goes to the charity and the rest goes to running.
Administrative, yes.
Right.
Well, that's good. I think at the time it's so important. I mean, we're living through, you know, a pandemic, a time of great division within the country, and where, as you said, people are just all about themselves, and I think it's just so important for people to show that they care about, you know, others, and that they literally lend a hand to help. Now, you know, always, but especially now.
Maybe we've lived in a period before of a lot of self-involvement, a lot of me and how much money do I want and what do I need. I think that what we're going through right now puts a stop to it. A friend of mine in Italy, she said, maybe this has been good. We've had to stop to think about really what is important and what do we need. And I think that thinking of charity and thinking of giving to others, I think it's a way of lifting our souls and lifting our well-being.
I do too. I have a final question to ask you, Vicente. What is happening with your photography? Are you still photographing? And
Yeah,
you are, for everybody who does not know, in addition to everything Vicente does, his 5th book, and all of his incredible interior environments that he's created, he's also an incredible photographer. So I would, yes, I wanted to ask about that as my final question.
Actually, I was photographing a job, not of mine, but of somebody else today. The whole book is, you know, all the 4 books I've photographed. That's what I've been doing for the last 3-4 months, is photographing. And exciting, very exciting. Last Friday, somebody bought one of my photographs for their living room that got blown up 8 feet high by 5.5 feet wide. And I was there being hung, and it was like, wow, I did that, you know. Interiors, you know, I know it's going to come out well, but each time I see one of my photographs and they're in focus, that, you know, hey, I mean, I did that, you know. So now the cameras do it for you. But, you know, it's something I love doing when I travel, when I'm here. It's you know, it's so immediate. When you take a picture, you saw it. When you're doing interiors, it's like 9 months, 8 months of waiting to have this child. But a photography and the emotion that a good photograph can have can just, you know, just bring you to another level.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, it was so nice to speak with you today. I hope that I get to see you in person sometime soon. I don't know when I'm gonna, you know, when we're gonna get back to dinners and cocktails.
If you come, you can. I have a terrace, and now everybody's come for dinner, and we sit at the terrace, which is fresh air, so you can take off your mask.
Okay, we're gonna get our friend Timothy Corrigan. Timothy, if you're watching, and we'll have a reunion. How's that sound?
That sounds the best.
Thanks for being part of Masterclass, Vicente.
Have a good week.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Metropolis Think Tank Thursdays. Thank you so much for joining us today. As many of you are probably aware, this is the 6th year for Metropolis's Think Tank series, a thought leadership program that visits top firms in key markets in North America. We launched the virtual version of this program in August with firms from San Francisco, and then we visited Chicago and Miami, all via Zoom. This month, we're hosted by Houston firms. In December, we're going to be in Los Angeles. Upcoming Think Tank Thursday programming can be found on the registration page and will be continually updated. Today, we are very pleased to be hosted by Canon Design. We will be exploring how we can support employee performance in all types of workplaces. And what do we mean by that? We often think of workplace in the context of commercial business, you know, tech or finance or media, but universities, health systems, research organizations, all of those types of organizations have often 30 or 40%, sometimes, you know, 1/3 of their overall real estate dedicated to work settings. So what insights can we glean from the experience of those types of organizations in 2020 as they deal with the kind of change that we're all grappling with? Hosting an event like this requires the support of great firms like Canon Design. Thank you so much, Canon, for hosting us today, as well as our amazing sponsors, Ava Flooring, Create, Innovate, Sustain, DuPont Tedlar, PVF Film for every surface worth protecting, etc. The right mix of attitude, style, and products to make your work style meet your lifestyle. Loft Wall, manufacturers that bring focus spaces to life through data-driven design. Material Bank, the largest material marketplace for sampling in the architecture and interior design industry. And Versteel, a solutions provider of American-made furnishings for working and learning environments. Thank you so much to our sponsors for making today's discussion possible. Our panelists are an amazing group of folks. We have with us Gaurav Khatse, who is Associate Vice President, Facilities Portfolio Management at University of Texas Medical Branch. Thanks so much for joining us, Gaurav. We have Swapna Satyan, who is Director of Strategy and Change Consulting at Blue Cottage of Canon Design. Thanks so much, Swapna, for joining us. As well as Bill Cox, who is Assistant Director of Facilities and Dining Administration at Texas A&M University. Bill, thanks so much for joining us today. I'd like to start today's discussion with Gaurav. Gaurav, healthcare organizations have faced some of the most challenging times this year, literally everything that the pandemic can throw at them. How are you responding at UTMB, and how is the facilities team in particular that you're a part of participating in that effort to respond to the challenges of the pandemic?
Great, thank you, Avi, and thank you everyone for allowing us to share what we're going through and what we've learned so far. There's no pressure at all. That's 200 participants here, so welcome everyone. Yeah, Avi, so that's a great question. Over the last 8 months, it's been a roller coaster. And every day has been kind of very different from the past day when it comes to facilities. But I'll kind of give you a little bit of an overview about what we did in the beginning, where we are, and then I'll focus my my discussion mainly on the workplace. So when the pandemic kind of became more real here, somewhere in February, UTMB established the incident command structure. If you're not familiar with it, it's a structure which is more hierarchical, and the president is basically directly in control of all the operations and planning that takes place. So that was established very early on. That helped us a lot because we started planning very quickly testing sites, surge capacity, and that's where the facilities team got engaged very quickly. But even before that, in December, our planning team got involved because our risk management started looking at opportunities to identify screening sites in December when the virus was still in China. So we had already identified sites for tents and things like that. But as we went into February and March, that was our main push, is where is surge capacity for us? What are we doing to prepare for the patients that are coming in? How are we going to keep our staff safe? Where are we going to put tents? How are we going to do drive-by testing and things like that? So 2 months, that was the prep. We put tents in the EDs. We had tents in the parking lots of the clinics. We started deploying plexiglass at registration desks and things like that. So facilities, of course, was an integral part of all this, right from planning to our construction team. But ever since that time, this was March, right? Ever since that time, things have evolved because right after that, the surge never hit in Houston as hard as we thought. Fortunately, we had surge space, but very quickly, our hospital realized that it's not the space that's the bottleneck, it's the staff. Staff is not trained. There's also equipment. We don't have enough equipment and PPE and all that. Bottlenecks were different. So kind of focus shifted towards that. And we started looking at those pieces while the facilities folks started putting guidelines together on what are the occupancies for different spaces and how do we need to make sure that our staff is safe while giving the care. But let me switch gears to the workplace because we need to talk about that. Healthcare is one aspect, but when we talk about workplace and healthcare, it's different from a traditional workplace. It's not like a typical office space, right? And if you just generally look at a care environment, you have the healthcare providers, the physicians, the nurses, the residents, the fellows. Then you have the clinical support like the lab techs and the radiologists. And then you have the logistical folks like the linen folks and the food services folks that are doing their job. And then there is the fourth piece, that is the business operations piece, right? You have the legal team, you have the finance team, you have people like us, the facilities team. So workplaces for each of them varies. When it comes to the healthcare, the good thing that our incident command did right away was we designated 2 floors in our hospital, saying this is the COVID unit. We're not going to have patients every which way. It's going to be in these 2 units. And then it came to us is, okay, how do we keep our staff safe while trying to provide the care to our patients, right? The first question was, well, deploy plexiglass everywhere. That was not the answer. Our COVID task force very quickly said, that is not gonna help. There are no studies that prove that in such an environment, it's gonna be very effective. It's not an office environment. There are nurse stations, there are decentralized nurse stations. Nurses have to move around. It's not gonna help. So our focus switched to some minor interventions. And this is where we started thinking a little differently. Our facilities team was tasked with, okay, what can we do then? Well, the first question was, what is this pandemic? Is this like a 100-year event? Is this a 50-year event? Is this a 25-year event? What are we planning for? Because if you think of a flood, if you think of a hurricane, we know what the probability is. What is the probability of this happening every year? And what do you want to spend on, the interventions? Because buildings are designed for 50 years. You don't want to sink so much money in something that's not going to be used for another 20 years, right? So we started prioritizing some of the low-hanging fruit. And very quickly, we realized that building systems was the key. You needed to treat the building systems. You needed to have better airflow. You needed to have better filtration. You needed to have better air changes on those units. You needed to have the ability to switch the beds to negative pretty quickly. Even though later on we realized that wouldn't make sense, but the airflow was important and infection control as such could be managed with that. So we started focusing on that. And we've actually on the 2 units really worked hard to put air scrubbers in and try to improve those pieces. Another small intervention that we did was instead of the caregivers going into the patient rooms that had COVID, we brought the equipment outside by creating an opening that had the probes going inside the patient room. So the caregivers could stay outside. So then it saved us PPE. It also kept the staff safe. So healthcare, we treated like that. Then it came to the next level, right? The pharmacy techs and cat lab, the lab techs and all that. Well, for them, they have to be on campus. They have to be in their office environment. We tried as much to provide social distancing, so we had to give more space to them. Of course, a lot of conference rooms were commandeered and converted to workrooms and things like that. That happened over time. And then the last level, which was people that were in business operations, our president made a mandate that if you can go remote, please go remote. So all the people in finance, revenue cycle, legal, that could go remote, they need to be remote. And at this point, we are trying to figure out, which of those folks can go permanently so we can consolidate space. So that's where we are. I think that's enough. There'll be more as we discuss this, but I think that gives you a holistic approach of what we've been doing over the 8 months. One thing I'll say though, yesterday was a new request. We had to find space for -70°C freezers that had emergency power in anticipation that we are going to start getting the vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that really detailed overview, Gaurav. Over time and over different teams, because I think those are really, we need to understand that matrix. And thank you for doing that. Also, I think, the focus on building systems. Of course, today, most of the folks in today's audience are architects and interior designers. And so, in many ways, when we're talking about resilience in the face of COVID, in some ways, we're also on the front line in a sense, even though we may not be, exposed to the virus in the same way, we do have huge responsibility here. So, I thank you so much. I appreciate you taking us through that thinking as well. Bill, I'd love to hear from you. What have been some of the key elements of your response to the pandemic, and how are you reprioritizing? Are you adapting any spaces? Just as Gaurav mentioned, making changes with Texas A&M's facilities?
First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone that's on the video today. And here at Texas A&M, we have about 66,000 students and another probably about 15,000 staff. So between faculty and staff, and so we're like a small city of about 80,000 people. And so to kind of give you, Gaurav talked about a few buildings. We're talking about 600 buildings and 25 million square feet of space here at Texas A&M. So, for us, there's really no cookie cutter method in how we how we address that from a facilities perspective. And so, and like Gaurav said, at UTMB, a lot of things very similar. I mean, our buildings are designed to be 50 to 100 years old. And, if you look at what is happening, especially in the life of an educational institution, Texas A&M is, 130 plus years old. This is a small time frame. This is very short term in the overall life of a university. And so balancing that short term, though as impactful as it is, with the how do we operate long term, and with the educational component. So we're talking about the workspace with 66,000 students. This is their workspace, whether they're in class or they're working on campus, in different types of venues. We have everything from traditional classroom space to research labs to teaching labs to what a lot of people consider the traditional office space. But there's also people who we house over 10,000 students here on campus. So you have people working in a living environment and those students living in that environment as well. Then you talk about recreational space. We have one of the largest recreational departments in higher education in the United States. And so with over 1,400 students that are employed on top of the staff that are employed there. So how do you make those environments safe? And so there were a lot of things that went into it. One of the challenges that we faced right away was when the call came that we're going to close down. We were during our spring break. So all of those students were gone. During that time, it actually happened on, I believe it was either Thursday night or a Friday, we had 3 days off as faculty and staff. So not only are there no students here, there's very few faculty and staff that are physically at work. And so getting that word out that we're extending spring break by a week, we need to start working from home. And then the conversations of, okay, how do we take care of that? And we went through a lot of the same conversations that Gaurav mentioned of, do we put up plexiglass everywhere? Financially, that doesn't make sense. And again, we have epidemiologists on campus, so relying on their input, and they're like, we don't know that that's really the solution. And coming down to, it's about air changes. It's about moving the air, and but how do you do that in several hundred buildings? Fortunately, with it being such a large campus, we are on a we're all interconnected and controlled centrally by our own utilities. So we're very fortunate we have our own utilities provider. It's part of the university. And so we're on, backnet controls, basically the easiest way to put it. So we're on that system where our utilities folks can go in and adjust air changes. One of the challenges that we face, as any large enterprise, is how do we be sustainable and minimize our costs, especially with being responsible for taxpayer and student monies. So we have another, responsibility on top of that, but we came down to the side of, okay, we may be sacrificing some financial savings that we normally would have and being more efficient to the primary responsibility of let's circulate the air. So many more outside air changes, especially in our research facilities. So that was one of the first things, but also talking about filtration. And boy, did we have a number of conversations with different providers saying we can do these things with UV light and really, and being in a university setting, we have to go, okay, we need to be open to those things. But on the flip side, we can't be too bleeding edge, because if it doesn't work, we have that, financial responsibility, but also that, we can't be out there hunting for the next best solution. This is not the time to necessarily experiment. And so, we decided to move to MERV 13 filtration system, filtration in our buildings, the tried and true, what do we know? And, and it's been pretty successful. Again, the other thing is the type of environment we work in, as Gaurav said, we have everyone from faculty who are teaching to faculty who are doing research to we have our custodial staff and our maintenance folks to everyone in between, administrators working in offices. So how do we respond when there are issues? In the first place is we knew that a lot of people could go work remotely, but there's others like researchers researchers who've been doing 20 to 30, 40 years worth of research. You just can't up and stop research in an educational environment like ours. And so what do we do to help them be safe? And so educational materials were sent out. Our custodial provider has been great in working with providing chemicals to treat disinfect in labs, because typically our custodial don't go into labs, because the last thing you want is a custodian to walk in, clean something that should not be cleaned, and there goes all that research and millions of dollars of research. And that's kind of the dirty secret, is there are millions and millions of dollars tied up in these long-term research projects. And so, having to respect that and work with those individuals and educate them on, here's how you need to use disinfectant. If you run out, here's how you get more. And it worked well. Our vice president for research and his staff were great about getting the message out, working with our office to say, okay, how do we need to make this work? And it really has been pretty effective with the researchers. And then from there on out, as situations occur, like we have students living on campus. So if we have a COVID-19 positive or suspected student, well, you really don't want to be sending custodial staff in to clean, because now you're putting more people at risk. So working with our residential folks to, okay, what are they doing to move students? And so there's a lot of moving pieces, but really it comes down to, if the student's there, is provide them the resources with the education on how to take care of their space, clean their space, but also to put it away in biohazard bags so that we can remove it and dispose of appropriately. So there's been a lot going on. It's constantly moving. We're in the same kind of place as others, as, okay, how do we bring people back effectively with the rise here in the last couple of weeks? I think that's kind of slowed as a university, our efforts to bring more faculty and staff back. We've done a mixture of pure online courses this year to hybrid courses where there's an in-person component and students are able to watch it online. I will say most of our students, they are here locally. They're not here on campus. Most of our students live off campus, so they are watching remotely. So how do we transition that for the spring semester? And we're working through that. But one of the things, and I think the research has shown, the transmission is not occurring on campus in the classroom setting or in those work settings. And I think that's really important to learn. We've learned that this year, that's not happening. It's not just not happening at A&M, it's not happening across the country. And I know we had a number of people who were concerned about that, but putting things like movable face guards up in a lecture setting so they can move that face guard to provide that barrier between them and the students, so there's not transmission of aerosols directly out towards students and vice versa. And mask mandates on campus, they've been mandated the entire semester. And again, overall, our faculty, students, and staff have done a great job of following through that. So, I wish there was a cookie cutter. There's not.
Right. I think, we're here to talk about sort of how do we help people to perform at their best even during these challenging times. And I think you've reminded us of something really important here. That while we're thinking about safety at a pretty basic level, we don't want people infected, we don't want them infecting others, we want to keep people safe, but we don't want people's lives to stop, right? And people have their lives tied up in their work. I mean, as you said, there are research projects that go on for multiple years. The same is true, I think, of healthcare providers. I mean, these people do what they do because it matters to them, right? And so, supporting them in what they do can be such a complicated task, because it's not just about making sure that they're safe getting to work and back, but that they can continue to perform at the level that they are accustomed to, because of course that's what makes their life and their purpose, right? And so I think that's really important, right? So when you talk about millions of dollars tied into research projects, and you can't just lose that research, it's also that there's millions of dollars because there's hours and hours and hours of human work and ingenuity that have gone into those projects. So that's really important. And then of course, I like how through both yours and Gaurav's responses, we're learning things about how this pandemic, spreads. And so the focus on indoor quality, which both of you spoke about, but then Bill also, understanding what types of environments or what types of spaces are responsible for spread and what are not. So, understanding that, classroom environments are generally not high risk, right? And provided there are, safeguards in place. So, you know, like as we start to define some of those parameters, I think then we can maybe move towards understanding, you know, how best we can support people in workplaces. Swapna, you know, at Blue Cottage, you guide people through change processes. I mean, and this is a time of such unprecedented change. You know, it must be both overwhelming and exciting at the same time. You know, so what are some approaches that you're seeing across your clients that you're working with, specifically those of them who are in, you know, research or education or healthcare?
Overwhelming and exciting about sums all are Europe. Hello everyone, and happy to be here, and especially happy to be here with Bill and Gaurav because as Blue Cottage of Canon Design, we are a consulting service that is tied to the Canon Design operation, and so we work with healthcare clients, we work with education, higher ed institutions, science and technology firms. And when we think about change, it really is, there's multiple kinds of change. So there's change in terms of something happened, which it did this year, and how are we as humans all adaptable? And I think, you know, human beings are very resilient. Like the examples that Bill and Gaurav shared, right? We're able to apply ourselves, come up with solutions. And if there is no recourse, we will make the best of what we have. So I think this is actually proof that the last few months is our resilience, our resourcefulness, our ability to come together. I've personally been so enthused by how sharing and platforms such as this, like it's really become a conversation for the community and for the world to be able to address as one. So I think that's the positive. Let's just reinforce that. And then if you think of change from a perspective of moving along with the time. So in our work, and it's interesting because a lot of our clients engage us to think about what is the strategy for the future. And some of our clients engaged us even pre-COVID. And the reason they engage us is because they know that things have to change to adapt to the needs of the future. But capital investments in facilities are, you know, they are for a long term. So something that was built 30 years ago has not kept up with what technology affords us today. So even pre-COVID, we were in this form of, okay, we are making do with something that was designed before technology came in, and how can we start moving towards the future? So as institutions, we're looking at, okay, now as we design for the next 30 years, they call us and say, what do we need and how do we help people change to that future? So there's that macro change. And then the word change itself is so maligned, because think of it as if all of us wanted to go get the next iPhone. What we think about is, oh my God, I'm getting a new iPhone and I'm looking forward to the features. You're not thinking about it as, oh my God, it's change, I've got to manage it. Right? And so it's how we think of change and what change means. So the reason why we look forward, for example, to a new house or something that might still be a difference, like even if you think of space, is one, you have the autonomy, and Bill, you mentioned choice. There is choice involved. It's the choice, the autonomy, and this is where generational differences start coming into play. If you look at the boomer generation, they typically tend to look at change as with caution. You know, even if it is the iPhone, it's like, okay, it's something new. I've heard good things about it, but I don't know how I can use it. And then you look at Gen Y, which is more of an improvement. Hey, is this going to get me something more better than what I have? And then you have Gen Z, who are more of the expectation. Like, I expect things to change. Like, I can't be doing something that, you know, I was doing last year. Come on, where's the new thing? So generationally, the way technology is becoming part of our lives, it is becoming part of the expectation. So it's very interesting for us when we go in as strategists to look at the change that's happening at a macro level. Where is industry going? How is technology that's coming in going to impact it? Whether that's self-driving cars that are coming in, or whether that is, having a more personalized experience, because that's something that, it drives everything. We want a personalized experience because we know technology can give it to us. And so how do we then adopt the facility and the processes and the operational processes to meet that? So what COVID really did is it provided that cultural shift where you can take advantage of that shift to try and make any changes that are good for the long term. Not to say that all of this will go one, the one thing that it's interesting when we think about, especially around when we talk of workplaces, people always talk about offices and will I lose my office? And that's like the central question of most people, like, will I lose my space? Will I lose my office? And so when we really think of it, what does this mean to people? You have this era of where technology companies, and you can look at them for inspiration and for learnings. They were the first to understand that, yes, technology allows flexibility and mobility. Let's have our workforce work from home. They were also the first to say, just because you can work from home doesn't mean that you always work from home. Because they were realizing that if you're not here together, innovation doesn't happen. The serendipitous moments of meeting don't happen. And we don't know of how cross-disciplinary integration might work. And so the pendulum has always swung. And you have people, there's an article that in one of the things about how it's a satirical article about where you cry in an open office. But it is basically what tugs at change is looking at user needs and experiences. If we can solve for experiences and give a spectacular experience, which will enhance productivity and enhance institutional priorities, that is the case for change. And so anything that we do from a design perspective, whether that's space design, operational process design, experience design, if you can do all that, keeping the user front and center, if you base it on data, if you base it on evidence, if you test it along the way, all of which now we can and should be doing, that, and if you engage users, because this Gen Z wants to be part of the change, they want to be able to shape it. And that is, I think, what this last few months have done, is allowed us to tap into that psyche and say, can we then move this pendulum to a point where it'll work for the institution and for the user? Then from a point of view of just COVID and what change has done, or what institutions are thinking about, and this is across research institutions, education, or healthcare, there are a few things that really are top of mind. How do we solve for a hybrid workforce? Because it takes 30 days to make a habit. And so now everybody is used to having the choice to stay at home and work. Not everybody, I should say that. There were examples of, you have researchers, you've got essential workers, you've got people who do logistics, who have to be there every day. But if you were able to have some level of mobility and flexibility, people will expect to have some of it continue on post-vaccine. And so in the future, having everybody in the room all the time for a meeting is probably unlikely. At any given time, you may have someone for either professional or personal reasons be in another space. And so we've got to get used to this idea of a hybrid workforce, and how does space then allow for that, promote it, and maximize it? And then how do you make sure that it's inclusive at the same time, so people in the room are not feeling that they are the ones who really own the conversation, and people on the phone are just mute. There's this idea of adaptability of space, and both Bill and Gaurav, you spoke about how can we make this happen where we're not planning for the 100-year or the 50-year scenario, but enough to where we can be adaptable and flexible. So we are not boxed into something. We know things are going to continue to evolve. There's this idea of flexibility. There's this idea of technology advancements, and how can we keep up with it? How can we build long-term capital investments that will allow you to flex for changes in technology? miniaturization is coming. And this is something we see even in like with the learning environments. I recently spoke to a professor from the Texas area who used hologram for teaching. And the technology hasn't come to a stage where it's accessible by everyone. But that's not far out where that or other technologies may come in and people can think about a hybrid learning environment. It's not an either or, it's an and it's a broadening of that pie. So it's taking all of this into consideration and then also layering in the social and corporate responsibility, which is, I think, something that COVID has really, and this last 9 months and the combination of circumstances has really made that top and something that all talent wants. And as we think about recruiting and retention, it's also thinking about how do we get the people, especially in healthcare, where finding that critical talent is so hard. How do we make an environment that people will want to come to our institution and stay? So it's an exciting time, you're right. And I try not to think about the overwhelming.
Well, we have a few audience questions lined up here, but Swapna, your remarks made me think of something. And I'm wondering if all three of you could maybe respond to that just for a second, because, Bill and Gaurav, you're part of organizations that are, well-oiled machines. They deliver results. They have huge responsibilities. There's just so much going on, and some very, very bright and amazing people work at your organizations. I'm just wondering, as you're thinking about facilities or as you're thinking about other things, what are the conversations that you both and Swapna, you with your clients are hearing around how people have been measuring effectiveness in whatever terms, whether that's productivity or whether that's satisfaction or whatever, during this really strange year? Have you seen any changes in how we're thinking about how people are effective or how they're performing in spaces during this time, even as we're concerned about taking care of them and all of that? I'm wondering if that if that resonates with any of you. I'd love to hear some reactions, and then we'll start to take some audience questions here.
No,
So, you want...
Go ahead, Gaurav.
No, after you, Bill.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Avi, I think it's a great question, and and the thing is, when you work with so many different people that have come from so many different backgrounds, and again, we are an international research institution, so we have people not only from around the country but from all around the world that work here and do research here, and so part of that is understanding that as at different levels, at the different supervisory levels of, okay, what it is that your staff need and the people that you work with need. And, for me, communication has been much different than what it was prior to COVID. I really look at, the division I work with, and, our vice president that maybe 3-4 times a year would have meetings where he'd bring everyone in our division together, and it's a division of about 500 people, to say, here's where we're going and here's what's happening. Well, he, to his credit, initially for the first few months, it was every week he'd have what he would call online office hours that anyone in the division could join, and he would say, here's where we're at, open up for questions. And he's continued that as things we got into a new normal, I guess, for lack of a better term. He's continued that, but done it bi-weekly, because after a while, there really weren't a lot of new things happening, new decisions happening with COVID. And but he has continued the process. In fact, we have our next update meeting tomorrow, and with him tomorrow morning. And so I think people, and it comes down to people. It doesn't matter the facilities. I think the technology. I think Swapna talked about it, that meetings moving forward, and we were moving this direction. I think COVID has kind of enhanced that. Is meetings are going to be hybrid. They're going to have some people in person and some people remote. I can speak personally. One of our conference rooms, we have updated the technology to make sure we have high definition cameras. We did that in our classrooms, and actually spaces that weren't classrooms, we've done that, but really to try and bring that connectivity in, knowing that this isn't going away. It may not be as intense as it is right now, but I think it's one of the things that will stay. And I don't know that that's a bad thing. I think, going forward, that's a positive. But I think that intentionality of supervisors and folks working with their staff, whereas I think, I don't want to make it sound like we took it for granted, but I think there wasn't as much focus. And now, because your people aren't connected to you and you're not seeing them every day, and I think we talked about it earlier, that the human interaction. I saw something on the news this morning that we interact in 3D. That's how we're wired. We're not wired to interact in 2D, and so that requires more intentionality on individuals with the people they work with, and especially those that they supervise and are responsible for. So again, I can speak for me personally, but I also know other folks on our campus that they've had that same type of interactivity, that the intentionality has been probably heightened in making sure that people are doing okay, not necessarily performing the work, but they themselves are okay, because if your people are okay, likelihood is they're going to be performing well. And that's a big key piece of it. I mean, every week in a staff meeting, we go around what I call the virtual room, and everyone gets an opportunity to say, here's what's going on with me, here's what I'm doing, and others are there to be supportive, and those types of things, where we may have done that in person, but continuing that. And I think it's even more important now.
All good points. I can add to that, Avi, a little bit. So right in March, when this happened, of course, a lot of people went remote, and somewhere in the June timeframe, our president said, people who can come back and start working, and about 60% people came back. And we were tasked in the end of March, our planning team was tasked to deliberately understand, what does remote working mean to us in a long term? And how do we leverage remote working to consolidate space and operationally save dollars? Of course, the lowest hanging fruit were leases, right? We had a lot of our functions in leases. We were paying somewhere in the tune of $2.5 million a year in office leases. So that was the first thing. So we went on a deliberate pilot study of phase 1, 1,500 people, where we deployed a survey to really understand, what the employees are thinking at a grassroots level. Did you work remotely during COVID? Was it good? What helped? What is the technology that you're missing? So we came out with 3 things. 1, there is manager competency. That's very important. Who's your manager, and how's the manager dealing with you, right? Second, do you have the technical skill set? Like, are you good with Teams? Are you good with SharePoint? Are you good with collaborating online? Or you're a kind of person who doesn't like that? You want to do a face-to-face. And the third thing was, do you have the technology to do that? Not everyone has a laptop. Not everyone has a soft phone. They have a desk phone. Not everyone has PDF files. So there was a lot we learned with our phase 1 survey. Right off the bat, we knew, man, this is not something you can just say, go remote and you're remote. Not going to happen. Plus, there were support spaces, right? Legal team had confidential files. You can't get rid of them. Facilities team had plotters, right? Our EHS had lab. You can't get rid of like those things, right? So we deliberately went on a 3-month planning exercise to meet with first all the employees. Then we met with their managers, and we quickly realized that the managers were not aligned with the employees. If the employees said, well, I can work 5 days remote, the manager said, I don't know what this guy is talking about. Who's going to be here flipping the switches on a BAS system if this guy is going to be remote? And then sometimes the manager is like, I don't need this person here. Why does he want to be here for 5 days? So we had to align them. And then we figured very quickly that there is a spectrum. There's not a one template fits all. Some people can be remote for 1 day, some people 3 days, some people 5 days, right? And that really morphed into a strategy that we had to create hoteling spaces on campus if we had to get rid of these 2 buildings, right? There is a cost to that. What is the return on investment to that? So we had to figure that out. Then the biggest piece was parking. People were like, okay, if I'm not going to be on campus, I'm not going to pay for parking. What are you going to do about parking? Then we had to come up with a flex strategy on parking that, okay, it's like the T-Mobile approach that if you have 1 gigabyte, you pay this much. If you have 2 gigabytes, so we are like, if you park 5 times, you pay $10. If you park 10 times. So we came up with that strategy. Then there was a technology strategy about, okay, you don't have a phone, let's flip you to a via phone or a Skype phone or a soft phone. There's a cost to that, right? And interestingly, what came out was we asked people, what do you care about the most if you're remote? If you come to the campus once a week, what do you care about the most? And many people said, most of the people, 75% responses were, we need a system to be able to book a space. If you're taking away my space, I need a system to book. Interestingly, coffee and all that ranked the lowest. The second was printing. So we knew we needed printers everywhere. So that's actually right now, that's where we are. We have just done 1,500 people, by the way, and we are 13,000 people. So we've done 1,500 people, and it took us about 8 months. Right about now, we just got approval to fund that first phase of getting rid of the 2 buildings and get the hoteling space. In January, we are starting with implementing that. But like Swapna, you said that data, without that data, whatever you plan is not going to pan out well.
Right.
People now even have cold feet, actually. Now that we're telling them that this is real, people have cold feet, even though they were the ones who gave us all the data.
Yep. What you shared, Gara, was spot on. It is those 3 things that really make a lot of difference.
Right.
And, it's knowing how to operate in a virtual world. So for
Right.
example, being a consultant, I've been virtual and mobile pretty much for my entire career. And there have been years, even in the past before COVID, where we would just keep Teams on. It was like we were sitting around a table. And so my team members knew when I had my coffee, when my kids interrupted me. It was just like they would know what I did if I was in the room with them. We wouldn't even go on mute. And so that's part of, it's a mindset, right? It's shifting what your expectations are. Like right now, we are all here. If one of you had your kids or your dogs move in, we wouldn't blink, because that's the expectation in today's day and age. A couple of things that you said about remote working and how do those be, I think you were right. It's very much an individual thing. So for example, even a person in the same role with the same level of flexibility, if they could work remotely, they even have personal situations. So, I might live in an apartment with 2 other roommates and I really can't get work done here. So I want to go to the office because that gives me what I need to be productive. So when we talk about productivity for a virtual or a remote world, and we talk about productivity in the COVID arena, they're 2 different things. Because right now, when we measure, we can't really measure true productivity right now, because each of us have parents who are at danger of falling sick, loved ones who may be sick, people who are losing jobs. We are not living in a normal world. So remote in a normal world is very different than remote in a COVID world. I think we should all acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. And then when you talk about productivity, to your point, Gaurav, we do a lot of research, we do a lot of user surveys, we get a lot of the data. And so, for example, in healthcare institutions, you have people who can be 100% remote. So you have revenue cycle, maybe they can be 100% remote. You've got people who can choose to be remote for majority of their week. So maybe they don't need space, but how do you keep them connected to the mission? How do you keep them in a way where you incentivize them to come to campus, like the Yahoo lessons, so that even though this is like, maybe I will go in because I know my team will be here on this day and I get to see them, even if it's once a month, twice a week, whatever that is. So I think how we look at space is going to change. It's going to be more of how do we create the experiences we need to be productive. And so it really is, productivity becomes more of enabling people. The old term of you sitting under your manager and him looking at you and knowing what you did while you made widgets doesn't apply anymore, no matter what job you do, right? It's really, how do you equip people to be self-reliant, autonomous, and how do you build that sense of pride in the institution so that they know they want to be a bigger part of this? So it's a larger culture conversation.
Right. I find it. Go ahead, Carl.
Sorry, one thing I wanted to say was anecdotally, all the managers, when we interviewed them, did say that productivity has gone up. There's no data to substantiate that, but that's what we've heard.
I would echo that just from my experience as well.
Yeah, and we actually sent out a survey across all industries and clients, and we got the same self-report.
I think we lost Swapna for a second. I think she was saying that self-reported productivity is definitely on a high, and that's something we've seen. Swapna might drop out, but maybe she'll call back in while we're waiting for her. You know, I find it really interesting. All three of you brought up managers and you know, the experience with managers and Gaurav. I was just going to say that, and your follow-up was about managers. So you know, I think it's really interesting, right? So you know, that relationship between you know, not just between team members where, you know, we're imagining a flat sort of group of people, but, you know, within hierarchy, how that changes is really interesting too. And then I think, you know, both, you know, all of you spoke about technology as a really important part of this. Of course it is. And then Gaurav, I think it's really interesting that, you know, when push comes to shove, I think we've learned what are the things that people care about in an office. And, you know, I would say I miss my printer dearly. So you know, I think you know, more than coffee. So it makes a lot of sense, right? And so that's why I think that only reinforces what Swapna just said. You know, that remote working during this really unusual time is very different from remote working in some kind of, you know, normal circumstance where we're not under this giant, like, you know, psychological stress all the time. I just want to take a moment to remind everyone we're here talking about fueling performance in all types of workplaces. And we have with us Swapna Satyan from Blue Cottage of Canon Design, Gaurav Khadse from UTMB, and Bill Cox from Texas A&M University. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thanks also to our sponsors, Ava, DuPont Tedlar, Etc. National, Loftwall, Material Bank, and Versteel for making today's conversation possible. We have a ton of audience questions, so we're going to start getting to them right now. Craig Park asks, what tools can we implement to foster better team collaboration in this hybrid model? And Frank Erickson, thanks, Craig, for a follow-up question. That's awesome. What technology can enable this? So basically, what can we do to foster better collaboration if we are talking about the hybrid space where, you know, in a meeting, some people might be in the room and some people might not be? Are you already starting to have those conversations with your workforces or with your clients?
We have. So for example, one of our clients, even before COVID, in the spirit of inclusion, said that even if you're in a meeting room and if there's even one virtual participant, everybody is on the meeting on their laptop. You can share the speakerphone, but for the spirit of inclusion, and so everybody has equal voice at the table, everybody is looking at it on the laptop. So that's like just a tactical, you know, how do you create that teaming? But then using a lot of technology tools, we use Miro, we use Poll Everywhere. It really is like you can be in a room and whiteboard. So you can replicate that experience to a certain degree, right? I mean, there's no substitute for human presence, but you can still replicate it and be, what I think will change a little, and what, especially like in my role as a client consultant, when we do a project now, for example, we insist that we have mandatory at least weekly check-ins with the project team, which we may not have had in a previous life, because you know when you're there, you're there. In this virtual arena, it's very easy to get disconnected. So you have to be a lot more thoughtful. And Bill, you said this, you've got to really be very careful about thinking of when you're going to touch base and how do you connect and make that a priority.
I think I agree with what Swapna you said. From my standpoint, I think if you talk really the tools that you need, you have to have the technical tools. Like, people should be trained in using the virtual platforms equally. Everyone should have the same skill set at a minimum. Some people are very good right now at using Teams and Skype and SharePoint, and they save their files properly. But there are people who don't do that well, right? They don't have a filing structure. They want the paper in the hand, and they still struggle sharing screen. I think institutions like ours really need to invest in training, the technical training, right? Number one. Number two is the soft phones. I think we heard that, you know, the ability to get to people quickly, to be able to communicate with them, to have these deliberate collisions, you need to have access to them, right? And the soft phones, the ability to call from your phone from anywhere and get to them on your laptop because they don't have a dedicated desk or phone is another very critical aspect. I think that's a tool that we learned that needs to be there. The third thing I would say, like I heard, was the software that allows you to pull up the floor plans on your phone while you're on the fly, that, hey, I'm heading to my office because I had to do this and my team is sitting here. Like I have XYZ, all my members are here. Let me book this room or let me book this conference room. So that is the focus, I would say. The fourth piece, not as much technical tool, but a tool that HR needs to really focus on is the ability to train managers to be able to handle a remote workplace. You know, how do you do performance evaluations? How do you make deliberate attempts at communication? How do you do check-ins when they're remote, right? Those things are not really there. You know, there are leadership programs and there are all those, but nobody has talked about how do you manage a remote workforce? But that is new. So our HR was tasked with that. You know, go ahead and develop a program for that piece. So it's again a work in progress. We'll see how successful these tools are.
Okay. And I think one of the challenges we have as a teaching institution and research institution is the research shows that you learn better by in-person having that contact. I mean, you know, online learning only goes so far. There's something that you don't get in that. And that's no knock on online learning at all, because there's a lot of great things you can get there. And so as an institution, trying to find that balance. And, you know, again, I'm a facilities person, so I'm not in the educational theory part of it, but that's what they're wrestling with, is how do we find that balance of, you know, creating that safe environment, because, you know, this next semester there's no vaccine that's out there yet. I mean, we're getting really close, and, you know, I think a lot of people are excited about that, but especially in some of the courses that are taught, our students have to be able to have that interaction. The learning just isn't there without it. And so, you know, it's looking at those technologies, and our IT folks have been working, you know, diligently for months trying to work with our faculty in our instructional staff to, how do we do this? How do we get you the tools? You know, how do we maximize Zoom or Teams? We tend to use Zoom for the instruction piece because there's a lot more flexibility and you have, you know, better tools, but Teams is better in a lot of different elements than Zoom is. And so it's not necessarily that there's not a cookie cutter out there of this one does it all. So I think having that, so if you're taking a look at it from, well, there's only one, we have to pick one, I don't know if you really can. And again, that goes back to funding, financing, all that, but that's the other piece. You've got to look at the money. And, you know, as much as you hate to say it, that's a key portion of it, is what can you afford? What can we do? And decisions, right, wrong, or indifferently, are, you know, a lot of times driven by what you can afford to do to deal with the short term, plan for it in the long term, but not negatively impact the long term. And so, you know, that's something we struggle with every day. And, you know, is how do we do that? And, you know, I know that the individuals I talk with on the academic side, that's a real concern for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from all of you is that, you know, there needs to be some kind of deliberateness to our decision making. Like, you know, we can't just be acting out of desperation or compulsion. And, you know, to some extent, I think, Bill, what you're talking about, you know, the money makes us take those decisions deliberately and within some kind of framework beyond, oh my God, you know, how do we work with this? But that, you know, there's a slowing down of the process and being like, okay, we need to look at this carefully. And I heard that in all of your opening remarks as well. And so, you know, I think that's really important as we're looking at what new tools we can adapt. I have a couple of quick technical questions about air changes and filtration. Gaurav, Bill, if you want to field those for us. Liesl Morrill says, what was it about air filtration with UV light that left questions about its viability compared to air filtration using MERV filters? Does that one of you, Gaurav, do you want to take that one?
Well, we haven't yet explored the UV germicidal irradiation piece. I've heard about that. Our property services team has probably looked at a pilot somewhere that it goes in the duct system, but we haven't looked into that. The MERV 13 filtration system, though, makes sense. But what happens is when you put those filters, the load on your systems increase, right? So you can't just make that decision that, oh, go change all the filters to MERV 13. Now you have to figure out, is my fan capable of the fan coil or the AHU capable of handling that, right? Because the load increases and you may end up damaging that. So now you have to evaluate the capacity there, right? You do that, then you have to evaluate the capacity of your energy. What are the energy consumption going to be? Is there utility providing enough? So there are a lot of dominoes to each decision you make. So you have to really consider that holistically. In our case, what we had was over the last 3 years, we have had a very aggressive energy savings program, and we have to hit those targets. Now that goes out the window. Now you start looking at, MERV 13. You're running, 100% air change. You're changing out your front end equipment. So that's happening. That's why we chose the 2 floors. We didn't say change for the whole building. We are trying to figure out, how do you do it? How do you isolate the 2 floors? Try to do it for that. Yes, it is expensive. You're going to add some more equipment, try to do that. But at least we have those 2. Again, thinking of that time frame, does this event come back in 5 years? Then we have those that we can flip and again, make them independent. That's what we are looking at. Now, in the future, as these UVGI equipment become more ubiquitous, they are proven, then probably it becomes something that becomes real for us. At this point, we are going the tried and tested route.
Right. So did you consider UV?
We did, and it really came down to, again, no space is cookie cutter, and we have a lot of spaces that have large volume. When you're talking lecture halls where you have 500-600 people in them, that's a large volume of space. And what we found is the UV work well in the duct work, but there's so much air circulating that the effectiveness, there's no guarantee that you get all of that air into the return plenums, and some are ducted and some are not ducted. And so for us, again, no one system when things are built much differently, especially over, I think, we've talked about this, that, we have buildings that are over 100 years old to a building that just opened this fall. And so they're much different. Filters were an easy way to go. Fortunately, the last several years, as we've been upgrading air handlers through our deferred maintenance program, we always usually build in a little more capacity because we have a lot of air handlers that are 50 years old. They're running well mechanically. If they're well maintained, air handlers can run for a very long time. A lot of times you run out of capacity. So we always try to future-proof as much as possible. I think Swapna mentioned you can't predict the future, but we do know that typically more demand is going to be put on equipment such as air handlers. And so for us, we're in, as Gaurav talked about, we have buildings that, especially those that have been recently done, going to MERV 13s and being able to up that draw is not taxing our systems. Now, some of our other buildings, a little more, but we've been pretty fortunate the last few years that we've tried to be proactive and long-term think and not just go like for like replacement with capacities as well. We try to build in some cushion. So that's benefited us. It just, there was nothing to say that UV is in our situation is the best solution for us. Now, as that technology develops, and if this continues to go longer term, then that may be something we have to look at. But right now, we had to respond fairly quickly. Also look at the cost and what we could do, but also the reassurance to people that are in our buildings that they're as safe as they can be. And right now, for us, the MERV 13 technology was a more tried and true solution that goes to people's comfort, because it's not just the physical comfort, it's that emotional comfort of knowing, okay, they're doing what they can do, they're making it as safe as an environment as possible. And people know filtration. They understand, oh, if you have proper filters, they've heard HEPA filters for years. And so I think that goes as much to anything, the peace of mind
Right.
in that. So
In fact, Bill, you hit on a very important point there where you talk about upsizing some of this equipment. I think the incremental costs of doing that when you're building a new building are totally worth the investment, because
yes.
they give you so much flexibility in the future, not only to flip your users pretty easily, but if we ever get hit by pandemics like this or other, you can see historically we had Ebola, then we had the SARS, we had H1N1. You can see there is a pattern that is, I hope that breaks, but I'm just saying historically you can see these things happening. So the incremental cost is worth it to upsize the building systems.
And to follow up on that, one of the things to think about, and I think pre-COVID, it's sometimes tougher to do that, but if you can put the infrastructure in now, you don't necessarily have to build it all out to begin with, but if you can put the infrastructure in when you're building new, that's the time to do it. Because that infrastructure, if you don't do it now, you have to do it later when you have to upsize. If you don't put the capacity in now, it becomes so much more expensive and almost cost prohibitive as you move into the future. It's such a small portion now when you're building new. If you can do it now, 100% recommend that you do it. You may not see it. It may not be, quote, sexy, but I guarantee you, as you move forward and you need to increase whatever it is, that with that infrastructure put in place, it could be you just need chases there because you don't have the ductwork now. But if those chases are there now, you're not taking away space later. And you're not spending all this extra money later, because in the bones, it's cheap on the beginning, because when you're coming up out of the ground, it's all the same. Now, if you're having to modify what's there, it is so much more expensive in the long term. So you got to balance between what you have and what you can afford now. But if you can squeeze a little more out now, it's going to save you down the road so much when you have these types of situations.
Absolutely. And I mean, Swapna said that, right? She was like, this is the time to ask what it is that you can put in place that's going to serve your future goals, because we're in a moment where all things have opened up suddenly, right? Like possibilities have opened up, and so I think absolutely, and also the air in our cities is not getting any cleaner. I mean, I think we had a brief moment of foolhardy optimism early during this pandemic where it was like, oh, the air is getting cleaner. Well, not really, and so until we solve those larger problems of like our systemic issues of pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, certainly indoor air quality is something worth investing in, just straight from the start. Frank Erickson real quick asks, typically how many air changes per hour did you bump systems up to? Does either of you have a figure off the top of your head? If not, I understand.
In some areas, we were averaging about 8 per hour before. We are pushing 12 to 14, depending on the use of the space. So I think usually about every 5 minutes, we're changing the air on average in our buildings. Whereas, per energy code before, it used to be, 8 was a high level. We had in some research areas, the nature of those labs, we would be changing them 12 to 14 times, but we're closer to probably on average about 12 times an hour, even just in general workspaces or classroom areas.
Right. 12 is what I was going to say, is 8 to 12. Certain rooms where we were making them negative were a little higher, but we realized our epidemiology team and the COVID task force came and told them that that's not effective. We didn't need to do that on bed units.
Yeah, every 5 minutes is also, I think, around where the recommendation from the International Well Building Institute is. They've been their task force has been looking at this as well. A couple more questions here. Just a couple more questions. Frederick Elman asks, how long do you expect the COVID changes made to your work environments to last? And I think this speaks to all three of you talked about, long-term versus short-term in your opening remarks. What elements do you think will stay in the future? What are you putting in place or recommending with clients or working with clients through now that you feel is going to stick around for them for a while? And we spoke about hybrid teams, and I'm sure that's going to be one of them. But is there anything else?
The thing that outside of the hybrid teams, of course, which I think will be here to stay, is one is we had seen this trend towards densification. It was not from a space saving as much as, okay, I have so many people, now I've hired 3 more, they need to be close to these people, let me just shove them into this room because I don't have any other place for them. And this is especially true of all our healthcare clients, because it's you hire people and you didn't originally plan for growth as well as you would have. So as we are getting into a de-densified layout, I think that will continue to stay. I think there is going to be, some semblance of, okay, let's have some space around us. And then I think the organizations that are moving towards some of these mobile hubs or the remote for people who are remote, like the touchdowns and areas where people can use them. I think that's something that will continue. Just having amenities for that highly remote or highly mobile workforce.
Right.
I'll talk a little bit from the healthcare standpoint a little bit. Right before this pandemic, over the last probably 2 decades, there has been a push for healthcare to go more ambulatory. A lot of clinics were being built in the communities, and the idea was, well, the hospitals start becoming a little smaller, more for the acute, and all the clinics start becoming outside. And this has flipped that philosophy over its head, right? As soon as COVID hit, now you want beds. So how do you deal with that? I think one thing that's going to stay long term with hospitals is that, yes, I think that makes sense to start putting clinics and start making the primary care out, have more acute care, but they have to reserve some capacity. That is not going to go away. You need capacity. Now, whether it's in the form of some kind of a flex space that can quickly be changed for events like this, or for anything. Like in our case, we are on a barrier island. Our main flagship hospital is in Galveston Island. We get hit by hurricanes. There are floods. And in that case, can that be used for shelter in place? Right? Those flex spaces become very important for us, and hospitals are mitigated spaces with emergency power and ability to sustain for 4 or 5 days. So I think that philosophy is going to stay for a longer time. The other sticky part, I would say, and it'll be great for all of us, not only as institutions providing healthcare, but also as consumers, I think telehealth and virtual health is going to stay. Up until now, the whole push, there was the push towards telehealth, but there were no reimbursements. So you couldn't do a FaceTime call with your patient and get reimbursed, right? The reimbursements didn't work out. As a result, you had to put in a lot of telemedicine equipment. It's been easier now. You get the same reimbursement. As a patient, I'm a patient. My doctor has seen me a couple of times on FaceTime. I love it. It's fantastic. You don't have to go to a clinic. You're afraid of going to a clinic, sitting in a waiting room. That's going to stick. I think the third thing that's going to also stay post-COVID is because of virtual health, your borders are going to dissolve. Why would I go to a doctor in Houston? If I like someone in San Francisco or Chicago, why wouldn't I seek them out, right? Or why won't someone in Chicago want someone in Houston? So I think for healthcare systems, this is a great opportunity. This is going to stay. If health system reimbursements stay, this is going to be the biggest shift you're going to see in healthcare going forward, is the telehealth component, the dissolving of borders for healthcare, reserving surge space in hospitals. That will be crucial.
And I would actually add to that. I think that border dissolution that you speak of could also be, we've heard that, it could also be international.
Yeah, I mean, what stops you, right? These barriers.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily for healthcare, because you still have licensure, but
the reimbursement.
But if you think about education, that's an area where we see, okay, if we are going to a form of virtual education and then a hybrid education model, is there the possibility that you can widen your pool and actually draw in applicants from around the world? So
one of the things, and in education, has been one of the positive things, and I'll say this as a parent of a of a high school junior who is starting to look at colleges. One of the greatest things that have come out of this is that institutions have had to rethink their recruitment efforts. Mm-hmm. And it is, from having an opportunity that I would have said a year ago, I don't know if we would have the same ability to take a in-depth look at a university virtually like we are today. And this all occurred within a very short period of time of institutions being forced to go online. And so I think the recruitment efforts, you talk about going across social economic classes or even international, that there are going to be students that are going to be opened up to universities that they may have never even considered because the world has been made smaller in that type of a situation. Now, the flip side of that is we have heard loud and clear from our students, why should I have to pay the same while I'm taking virtual classes? I want to be in person. And I think a lot of it is they want the choice to be in person. And, that ability there, we have found out it actually costs us more per credit hour to teach virtually than it does to actually do it in person. And so I think that's kind of one of the unique things we've discovered is virtual learning is not cheap. Though people think it very well could be. Well, it's simple. You get on a computer, it's everything that runs behind the scenes. And so I think there's pluses and minuses. I think that ability to reach more people, to open them up to what your institution has, but at the same time, there's still that demand for students like, we want to be in that classroom, because I think especially our students today really understand the ability of being connected. And I think the technological challenge we have moving forward is how do we set ourselves up so that we can do that as much as possible in a virtual setting, but also still have that. And Swapna talked about this earlier when it came to meetings, but also be able to do that in person, because that's the challenge. And, when we design classrooms, we don't design them to be big, wide open spaces with a lot of distance between people. I mean, the research shows the closer you are together, the better learning happens in those situations. And so for us, we've learned a lot about, okay, if we have to turn on a dime again, we know what we can do this time and we don't have to muddle through it. But it's putting those spaces and the technology that if we have to do it, we can do it. And the one thing that I'll say, and I can only speak for higher education, there's been push for more online learning from Texas A&M. We are very traditional in-person learning. We are not one of the big online learning institutions, but we showed that we can do it. And I would say the ingenuity, and others have talked about this earlier, when we're forced to do it, we can do what we need to do to make it work. And the amount of lift, and not just here at Texas A&M, but I mean all over when in higher education and outside of higher education, healthcare. When we're faced with a challenge we've never faced before, we can make it work and we can jump to it. And I think that mentality moving forward is probably the biggest thing that we can take from this, is that when faced with a challenge and knowing we need to do it, I would say for the most part, we've all been able to step up and do it. So.
Swapna, I'm going to address a question particularly to you. It just came in Silver to ask, what are your thoughts on the future of commercial real estate in the future of office spaces? And I'm asking you because you kind of touched upon a couple of these things already in your previous response, talking about flex spaces and support spaces for, extremely remote, acutely remote people and so on. Any other sort of patterns that you're seeing with commercial real estate, and then we'll do one last question before we close out today.
I think in addition to everything I touched upon, what we're also starting to see is those organizations that have suburban locations there's a little bit of that reverse migration. So, and this is a little bit of the futurist in me talking, so, take that with a grain of salt. But even before COVID, we were talking about the gig economy and how you have the ability to choose who you want to work for. And I think this also puts into the equation where you want to work. And so do I have the flexibility of going to a location in campus center? Do I have the ability to go to another place? We're doing a lot of work with counties right now to optimize their real estate portfolio. And so any organization that has multiple locations will probably start seeing this kind of a flex. So instead of having a dedicated office in one location, if I have access to multiple spaces that I can do my work and I can plug and play, which then means that you need the technology, you need the digitization, you need access to your paperwork wherever you are. So there's a lot of that comes along with it. But I think what this time has allowed us to do is that there is that opportunity to take what you have, if technology allows you, and if you can, mobility and flexibility is not just going to be in your office, it's going to be in different locations, wherever you want to be.
One last question here. I know, all three of you have been so incredible about talking about very concrete terms, concrete measures that you're taking at this moment, right now, in your spaces, as well as sort of, what some future endeavors are going to be. I'm wondering if you can leave us with sort of maybe an idea, maybe a measure, maybe an initiative that you're strongly considering at this point, or that you're looking into at this point, either for yourself or for your clients, or methodology or something like that, that you are, in the process of thinking about adopting, like near term. So not super far in the future and not something you've done already, but something that's near term. We'd love to hear, because I think for a lot of people, it's about how do you decide where to put that next step, right? That's often challenging. So if you want to take a moment, just think of that, and I'd love to hear from you, something that you're contemplating in the near term, or that maybe that's already underway and you're in implementation now.
So maybe while Gaurav and Bill are giving it a thought, I won't talk about what we're doing, but something I would love to leave everyone with this quote, especially applicable at this time. It's by Viktor Frankl, and it goes, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. What COVID has done is allowed us that pause. And if we take it as for what it is, that it is a pause to plan thoughtfully and think about what we can do and capture the best of what we have and what this has provided us, I think it's very powerful. So I know it didn't answer your question, Avi, but I hope it bought them some time.
Well, take some time to think is what you're saying. Right, go ahead, Bill.
And Swapna, actually, what you said is kind of along the lines of what we're looking here. And I think our push moving forward is not to get caught up in the near term. Don't let that drive long-term decision making. And in the type of environment that in higher education, you run the gamut of, well, this is an issue, you have to deal with it, you have to address it because it's happening right here and now. And yes, that, like you said, that pause to think and go, okay, we do need to address it, but how do we address it, and how do we think and do it for the long term? And so, if you're going to talk to design and moving forward, it's okay, the things that we learn, okay, maybe we build more restrooms that don't have doors so that you're minimizing touch points in places. Now that's something that ties into universal design. I know a lot of times we talk about that regarding ADA, but universal design goes way beyond just talking about ADA. And so it's taking those things. What are those? Oh, well, if we had less doors, we still create the privacy for restrooms. Well, that's less touch points. And so there's positives there. So it's more of that focus on the long term. Let's use our short-term lessons to help inform us as we're designing long-term and building long-term. We're just now breaking ground on a new teaching laboratory building. And so those types of things, again, a lot of things we've talked about, proper air changes, having the capacity to do those things, the long-term ability to adapt in what we're constructing. And so I think it's more of a re-emphasis on that and bringing people to ground them in that mentality of let's not overreact, but let's appropriately react, and let's make sure what we are doing sustains us for the long term, because we're going to have hopefully never another pandemic, but we're going to have things that will pop up. Gaurav talked about, UTMB down on Galveston. They're on the tip of the island. They are, hurricane central. For us, we get impacts. I mean, when Hurricane Harvey came through, we had 20 some inches of rain. So how are we preparing ourselves long term, knowing that some things may happen? We may not know exactly what that is, but are we in a place to be flexible to move forward, and our facilities can be resilient enough to get through whatever that is? It just happens to be this year, it's been COVID, and no one expected that. And so, I think that's really what we need to get to. And I think that's kind of the push we're making. It's not, I wish I would say it's something very tangible, but it's not. It's more of a mentality as opposed to something tangible.
Absolutely makes sense. Gaurav?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you all said. I think that has been absolutely what we have thought through. Some important tangible things that we did in the last 8 months. One is, in spirit of what you all just said, Bill and Swapna, we have reassessed our capital plan, right? Our capital plan is now different than what it was last year. We've put a lot of projects, a little delayed a lot of them, deferred a lot of them, so we have more time to think through it and implement them appropriately, right? That has changed. Projects have also been reprioritized, which projects make sense in this era, in this time, and for the long term, we've changed that. Low-hanging fruit, we've already started implementing them. I already talked about the fact that getting out of the leases, we need to get out of them. So we're working on that. An initiative that we're working on otherwise, after the low-hanging fruit is done, is that how do we make sure that we don't end up renovating a whole lot of space on campus? We have about 10 million square feet, right? And how do we make sure that we're creating hoteling spaces and things that can still enable people to do their job, but without investing a lot of money? Because again, we have to be good stewards of our taxpayers' money as well. So again, leveraging the telecommuting piece, leveraging how people have responded to minimize their space use to release move-in ready space. So for the next year or 2 years, we have enough space without doing a lot of renovation. COVID has really been a catalyst for some good things. And we are just using those good things for the longer term, which we anyways wanted to do, but we didn't have something that really pushed it over the edge.
Right. I mean, it's just all of you have basically said, are very much working in the same direction, right? So it seems like we're all looking for ways that we can use this moment, this pause between stimulus and response, and try to hit many birds with one stone. Bill, I loved your concept of can we look for other advantages? If we have to do something, can we do it in a way that it affords us future advantages, more affordances, basically, as we would say in design terms, right? And I think, Gaurav, to your point, it's like, it's not just about doing it for the sake of, getting a lot of advantages. It's also being responsible, for the investment you're putting in, but also, in environmental terms. I mean, doing renovations comes at a carbon cost. It's not, all of that stuff is resource intensive. So we don't want to spend money, but we also don't want to be wasteful, right? And so I think it all, we have this time to think this through. And I think some of the lessons we learned about being nimble and being sort of canny with our investments are lessons that hopefully will stand us in good stead for those future challenges that you talked about, Bill. So thank you all so much, Swapna, Bill, and Gaurav, for your time today with us. This has been absolutely incredible, and I've truly enjoyed how y'all have been able to jump from really concrete examples and measures that you're taking. First of all, thank you for being generous with sharing that, and also being able to draw some of those bigger conclusions. I really appreciate that from all of you. Thank you so much. Thanks also to our sponsors today, Ava, DuPont Tedlar, etc., Loftwall, Material Bank, and Verstu for making the conversation possible. A big thank you to Canon Design for bringing this conversation together, for bringing all of you together, and for hosting this discussion. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you all so much. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Again, architects in the audience, if you can take that survey for us, we'd be very grateful. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi. Thank you, Bill and Swapna.